I'm Patrick Flores, Professor of Art Studies at the Department of Art Studies and Curator of the Jorge B. Vargas Museum and Filipiniana Research Center, both at the University of the Philippines in Diliman. In this episode of Cultural Cash Online, I will be talking about the work Pulp and String by Ileana Lee from the Cultural Center of the Philippines Visual Arts Collection. Ileana Lee is an attentive student of surface. By surface, she means the substance that a thing seems to be made of, the many ways by which this substance changes its nature, and the chances of its ever-present remaking and undoing. Across all these aspects of seemingness, but also of substantiation, the artist anticipates a condition for form or experience to play out. For her, art is essentially a series of turns in becoming and unbecoming, never to settle into completion or identity or any other spectacular achievement. The work Pulp and String, dated 1980, performs this condition. It has a few vital but delicate parts. Strips of wood form two frames through which nails are driven on opposite sides, arrayed with more or less uniform intervals between them. Around these nails, white strings are tied so that each cord stretches from end to end. While these strings are generally tight and straight and tidy, there are loose ends here and there, and some knots or tangles are made to lie casually, which tend to serve as a foil to an otherwise linear geometry. Laid over this structure are traces of white pulp, presumably from paper mixed with liquid, mashed to generate traces of wet mass that cohere and cling to the strings unpredictably. The overall effect is a textured surface consisting of signs of fiber, whether as a string from a store or as a result of a process of breaking down, as in pulp. This texture as ornament is sufficiently interesting, a kind of filtrate or icing lavished on a flimsy armature, which tends to act as a strainer to catch random, though ultimately intricate tissue. But besides being an ornament, it calls attention to the ground itself of the work, which makes us speculate on how the pulp and the string are made to share ground. It could have been that the artist immersed the frame of strings in a vessel of pulp and adhesive mixture to catch whatever it could, took it out to let it dry or cake, and then perhaps let gravity do the work as the pulp dripped and encrusted the strings, which enabled the materials to intersperse, scatter, and bind. The ensemble mimics the quality and therefore the character of fiber itself, as it morphs from state to state, thread upon thread. The entire piece is set against a black background, staging the contrast between so-called positive and negative spaces as one finds in graphic work. This ground is an incipient grid that creates spaces between the elements. These spaces are left as they are, or filled incidentally or deliberately with flecks or clots of pulp. The material itself, therefore, is simultaneously the ground, the figure, the support, or even the fixative of what can only be considered a work of intermediality. It therefore complicates the flatness of a two-dimensional work. Through paper that becomes pulp, canvas that becomes string, and pulp and string that become inscription, like let us say pigment in painting. This is what I mean when I say that Ileana takes keen interest in the condition and method of the work, of not only how it becomes what it becomes, but of how its parts generate the possibility and agency of the form, or better still, the formative. She lays bare the devices, so to speak, but on another level, she proposes a new sensible event altogether, coming on its own through a process that reveals itself in the way it assumes incremental concreteness, as well as its reversals. She inevitably prompts us to revisit expectations of how art should transpire and ask questions like, what is paper? What is pulp? Is it ground or is it a figure? Is it paper mache and therefore sculpture too? What is an artwork? Or what is the work of art? Ileana Lee's body of intermediated work comprises prints as well. Her endeavors in the graphic arts gesture towards a range of techniques, expressions, and procedures. She seems to take pleasure in the tendency of repetition as a method to elaborate into an ornament, and in doing so, overcomes the alikeness of the repeated design to signal another constellation or moment of form. The print aesthetic also enables her to grasp the complexities of transfer and reproduction, in which difference is possible amid seeming sameness. As the artist-curator thinker Ray Albano puts it, in her own terms, she makes aware of the specific character by which she establishes her own standards, such as neatness, clarity of impression, and the exact use of materials. Printmaking to Lee is making impressions which can be purely visual and tactile, and keeps an equally abstract language which depends entirely on the medium. In 1977, 3 years before Pulp and String was made, Ileana Lee initiated an evocative project at the main gallery of the Cultural Center of the Philippines. She cut strips of tape and pasted them onto the threshold of a section of the gallery to institute and constitute a space within a space. She would reprise this intervention as a way to mark a presence for art, self, or country through the condition of space for a woman, an artist, a Filipino, and an Asian to explore. It is this very act of mapping out, signifying, and inhabiting space that art finds its measure and encounter with the other forces in the world. On a more intimate scale, Pulp and String does this too, as the work of art shares its skin to remind us what its matter is made of, or gathers more stuff to tell us what else it can do besides becoming itself. Thank you for joining me in this episode of Cultural Cash Online.